Good morning. It's June the 30th, 2020, and welcome to the Rabbit Hole. This morning, the Epoch Times released an interview that they did with Sidney Powell, Michael Flynn's attorney. And I have gone through this hour-long video, and I'm bringing you the highlights. So, hope you enjoy this, and I will talk to you later. God bless Michael Flynn, and God bless America.
The greatest irony in the case forever. Okay, so I've bragged about Judge Sullivan for years. Everywhere across the country, bragged about Judge Sullivan for requiring the government to produce Brady evidence in the Ted Stevens case. But what I didn't expect was for Judge Sullivan to deny every single Brady request document we asked for, every single one, in a 92-page decision that was just raging. I was flabbergasted.
In the court case against Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit has ordered Judge Emmett Sullivan to grant the DOJ's request to dismiss. But what will happen next? In the eyes of General Flynn's attorney, Sidney Powell, what are the implications of Judge Sullivan keeping the case open? Is there more exculpatory evidence to come in the Flynn case? And what are some possible steps to take to strengthen the U.S. Department of Justice as an institution? In this episode, we sit down with Sidney Powell, counsel for General Michael Flynn. She is also the author of License to Lie and Conviction Machine. This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek. Sidney Powell, such a pleasure to have you back on American Thought Leaders.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Well, you know, you've been very busy.
That's the understatement of the century.
And I'm going to ask you in a little bit, you know, kind of what it's taken to work on this, on General Flynn's case. But let's talk about where we are today. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals has basically has ordered Judge Sullivan to close the case. And I think he had 24 hours to do so, and he didn't do it. So what's going on? Where are we at here?
Well, they don't really put a time limit on the order, but I can't say in my decades of practice, and we're not going to number those, that I've ever seen a judge not do what he was told to do by what's called a writ of mandamus or extraordinary writ, an order directly from the Circuit Court of Appeals to do something. They always do it within 24 to 48 hours. I just haven't seen that happen, with the possible exception of one case way back when I had to get a writ of mandamus issued against a federal district judge twice in the same case. Now, we are certainly hoping that doesn't have to happen here, and that the order will be signed shortly, because he's not party to the case. That doesn't mean the full court can't review the case on its own, but it would be unprecedented to do so in these circumstances.
So you might be getting a file tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, the longer Judge Sullivan takes to dismiss the case, the more stuff they owe me. There's still a long list of things that I know are there from the government's own, from Van Grack's own Brady letters that I know is there. There's a January 30 memo inside the Department of Justice completely exonerating General Flynn of all things Russia. January 30, 2017, while he was still in the White House. And not only did they not tell him of all those things for his defense of this case, or back then, they used the Flynn prosecution to gin up an obstruction of justice prosecution or impeachment hoax of President Trump. Comey knew when he talked to the president on February 14, 2017, that Flynn had been cleared of everything. So when the president said, Flynn's a good guy, I hope, this is going to go, he should have told him, it's already gone, Mr. President. We cleared him weeks ago. And instead, he runs to his car and writes another Dear Diary that he leaks to the New York Times about how the president's trying to obstruct justice by just hoping the Flynn case is gone when it was already gone.
Fascinating. I mean, I guess it's this rabbit hole that keeps going deeper and deeper as we keep learning more information. We've been covering all of these different related issues from the get-go, for a number of years, and it's just unbelievable watching it evolve. And of course, we're kind of in the midst of, I guess, history being written here. It's fascinating.
Completely, yes. So yes, I could get, in fact, I heard there's more to come. More Brady evidence to come, and there has to be, because like I said, I know there are documents there from the government's own list that show he's innocent.
So, okay, right now, a few days have passed. The D.C. Circuit Court has said, close this case, Judge Sullivan. It hasn't happened. What do you expect is going on right now? Why the delay? And what's being considered?
Well, it could be that there are discussions going on inside the D.C. Circuit as to whether the court as a whole, they call it en banc, from the French expression en banc, when the court sits and all the judges, all the active, not senior, but all the regular judges of the D.C. Circuit would sit en banc and review the decision of the panel. That would be the only way to change the decision of the panel. And even more compelling is the fact that the very well-written and authoritative decision of the two judges of the panel who signed on to it rests on a very well-written decision by the chief judge of the D.C. Circuit, and it is authoritative on the very issues in this case. When a Rule 48A motion to dismiss is brought by the government, the leave of court provision that's in it is, according to the Supreme Court, is only there to protect the defendant from harassment. The government filed the most substantial motion to dismiss I have seen in my time in practice. It's 100 pages, including all the exculpatory Brady evidence that was found. And there's nothing to inquire about. The district judge doesn't get to go behind the documents that have been filed to inquire into the decision of the executive to dismiss any more than the executive could probe behind the Court of Appeals decision to see why and who and whatever happened to create that decision. It's separation of powers in our Constitution at the very basic level.
See, and then there's also this the order to vacate the amicus, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Judge Sullivan, and the first thing he did that went off the rails after the motion to dismiss was to name a, quote, friend of the court, an amicus, to pursue the case in the stead of the government. So his friend was going to brief it and did brief it, both against the government and the defense, as to why the case shouldn't be dismissed. He doesn't get to appoint a special prosecutor. That's all within the power of the Department of Justice to decide what is going to be prosecuted and when. Never mind the incredible double standard of, how they treated other people who might have been prosecuted for things and weren't.
So, when we were talking offline, you always have a plan A, plan B, plan C for everything. Maybe you don't want to, reveal all your cards, but what do you expect will happen here? Are you ready to take this to the Supreme Court, for example?
Whatever we need to do. I mean, I came in this case believing in my client's innocence, believing that Judge Sullivan was going to do the right thing and that we'd be done by now. But I know he's innocent, and I will not stop until that is totally proven and the Supreme Court denies my petition for rehearing, if necessary. We are going to continue this fight, however long it takes and wherever it goes.
Any sense of where Mr. Van Grack has gone after leaving the case?
Well, he was head of the FARA division at the Department of Justice. I'm assuming he's still there. I would certainly hope he is under a serious OPR investigation, because his conduct in this case in denying there was Brady material was appalling, completely unethical, not to mention the temper tantrum he threw at me when I told him Flynn was not going to lie and that he was asking him to lie, which he knew, by the way, because he had edited the plea agreement to take out the specific language he then insisted Mr. Flynn admit to. That was just a rather remarkable interchange. We still have a lot of work to do tying up some loose ends.
So, and with respect to General Flynn, he's been very, very quiet over quite a number of years. Recently, there were a few short interviews
Yeah, they weren't really interviews. He called into a few radio shows before everything got turned upside down by Judge Sullivan not signing the order, just to say thank you to the American public and the radio hosts in particular who have been so supportive of him and helped raise money for the Defense Fund. I mean, we've been operating off the generosity of the American people. And a lot of the donations have been what I would call the widow's mite.
Fascinating. And so is he under a gag order? Is that the...
No, there's no real gag order, but discretion being the better part of valor, and he is full of valor. He has chosen to try to let the system work its way out. That's what I've been determined to see happen, to make the justice system itself work and to pound on the Department of Justice to do the right thing here and restore its own reputation by moving to dismiss and acknowledge the wrong conduct of its agents and attorneys. That is hugely important to restoring people's confidence in the rule of law, the FBI, and the Justice Department. It's an imperative. It's absolutely imperative that the Department of Justice return to the time when it would self-correct. It's huge. I mean, when I was an assistant U.S. attorney, I was raised to tell the judge the truth, whatever it was, the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm on the record in the Fifth Circuit footnote for saying the agents botched it. The judge quoted me in the footnote in the decision. We still won because it turned out to be harmless error, but I wasn't going to say they had done the right thing when they did not. And that's the way an assistant U.S. attorney is supposed to be. Somewhere in the last 20 years, we lost that. We came to a time when these people think the end justifies the means. They're using the law as a weapon to destroy people, innocent people, to destroy people's lives, and that's not what our system of justice is about. So the Department of Justice has got to start standing up for the right thing. The only politics in this prosecution was from the very beginning of it, on the side of prosecuting General Flynn at all. And I'm convinced now, in particular, that what Attorney General Barr is trying very hard to do is right the ship.
You know, so this actually brings us to that pin that we put in earlier about this reform that you feel is needed. You're, suggesting some things in a very broad way, but this is a very big ship, and it's once it's started going, it's kind of hard to get it to come back, or so it would seem.
Very difficult. It's
right?
going to be very difficult, but it can be done.
So what
and it has to be done if we're going to survive as a constitutional republic built on the rule of law.
So what are your, kind of key recommendations? And, you've written about some of this, of course, but at this point, if you were to sit down with General Barr and say, here's what I would suggest.
I'd fire any prosecutor that intentionally violated the Brady rule. I would make it known immediately that if you know you have intentionally violated the rule that requires you to produce exculpatory evidence to any defendant, or you have criminalized innocent conduct, or you have made up a crime, you've got 2 minutes to give me your resignation. And then otherwise, there should be a sporadic independent file review. I'd like to see a conviction integrity review unit set up to review some of the more egregious cases by people independent, sort of the line prosecutors, and whose goal is to look for errors. The Inspector General's not enough for that. He doesn't have the authority needed to do what would need to be done for full file reviews. The same needs to be done with respect to the FBI. The Inspector General is doing that on multiple FISA applications and finding more and more fraudulent FISA applications. Every agent who did that should be fired yesterday. We cannot have government officials trusted with the power of the sovereign of the United States of America lying to federal judges. It's just, it just can't happen. It's completely unacceptable, and there have to be immediate repercussions for that. And another thing is the FBI should be required to record all its interviews.
Right.
It's a simple enough matter. They all have multiple recording devices on their persons at all times. And people should be told at the beginning that anything they say can be used against them by the FBI or a court, and that's a federal felony to lie to an FBI agent, and then decide whether they want to cooperate with the FBI or not. And if it's not recorded, it should not be used for any purpose.
There's some pretty concrete suggestions. Any final words before we finish up?
Well, one of the important things that we didn't hit is that the fact that the FBI actually made up the false statements that they then charged General Flynn with. They altered the FBI report of the interview since it wasn't recorded. And the government has admitted in their motion to dismiss that there are statements in the 302 that were not reflected in the notes of either agent. And they used those statements as, quote, the basis for the false statement charges. And then there are things in the notes that I couldn't make sense out of them until I saw the declassified transcripts of the calls. And then I knew that he had told them things about the call that they had not put in the report. So it ran both ways. They didn't put in things he did say that were true, and they added things to it, claiming he said them that he did not say. They made up the false statements.
And so, your prescription for agents that do this sort of thing is pretty clear.
Yep. Fire them yesterday, at a minimum. And frankly, what they've done is obstruction of justice, for which they should be prosecuted. The Department of Justice is going to have to start prosecuting agents and lawyers who lie to the court and make up crimes against innocent people.
What do you make, I have to ask you this, but there's this, large organizations of any sort have a certain sort of inertia, kind of a will to perpetuate whatever themselves, I suppose. That's something I've noticed over the years.
Yes.
in various scenarios. And also, there's this desire also to, I guess it's interesting because to maintain the integrity of I think there's people that feel that if all of this terrible stuff is exposed, no one will trust the Justice Department anymore.
No, I think the precise opposite is true. It's exposing what actually happened and remedying it by the Department of Justice itself acting on it and the FBI acting on it that will restore public trust. Hiding it is going to make everything worse. Nothing ever got solved by sweeping it under the rug.
Sidney Powell, such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Jan. It's always a pleasure to be here. And we thank the American people writ large for all their support for General Flynn, their prayers. We have felt uplifted by their prayers. And the whole team appreciates all of it.